In our last video, we went as far north along the waterfront as we're going to go. And now we're heading back here to Port Huron. We're going to begin where we left off when we went down Huron Avenue to Pine Grove Park, and that would be Pine Grove Avenue. We already covered the northwest corner of Glenwood and Pine Grove, the James Golden home. And I used this sketch here to illustrate what the home looked like. But since that time, I've come across an actual picture of the home, and it's a beautiful home, as you can see here. Pine Grove Avenue looks like this today, or at least in 2009. But when I was growing up, it looked more like this, and what I really want to show you isn't so much the float as what's behind the float, and that's the Mobil gas station. This station would have been right across the street from the old junior college or the old Maccabees building. This isn't a very good picture of the station, but this model gives you an idea of what it really looked like. I think the circular office there is what makes it different than most gas stations. Most stations at the time looked like this high-speed station. There was one of these just before you got to Pine Grove Park, and there was also one at State and Stone. I'm not sure which one this was, but they're almost identical. But as you can see, the gas stations were boxy, and most of them just had one bay. The Mobil station was quite ultra-modern with that curved office, and of course quite large with two bays to do the work in. For some reason, it always impressed me. Alright, let's go a little further north down Pine Grove, and we come to the Pine Grove entrance to Pine Grove Park there on the right. In the early 1940s, this was the gathering place for the bands and floats and balloons, and they would come out of Pine Grove Park at this entrance and turn left onto Pine Grove and go south. In this next short video clip, you'll see what I mean. Here you can see them coming out of the park. Also, there's something else that I want you to notice, and that's how many trees that there is on Pine Grove, and how much narrower Pine Grove was at that time. This gives you a pretty good view right here. Of course, with the widening of Pine Grove, it took out most of the trees then. Looks a little different today. On the left, of course, you have the hospital complex. Much different today also than it was back in the 1800s, early 1900s, and even later. The hospital grew as Port Huron grew. In the late 19th century, families cared for the very sick at home. Children were born at home. I was born at home. Doctors, if available, would provide care by horse and buggy travel. And as Port Huron grew, the community vowed to provide a small hospital facility to maximize the talents of the short supply of caregivers they had at that time. Fundraising began, and in 1882, the Port Huron Hospital and Home, as it was called then, opened on White Street. Back then, the hospital was more a place for providing comforting care than cure for outbreaks like yellow fever. In 1905, a new century welcomed a new, larger hospital built on Richardson Street. And it would have been just about here. This new 32-bed hospital was located facing Richardson Street. It opened on June 8, 1905. The original hospital on White Street was sold for $325. Private room beds in the new hospital were $12 to $15 per week, and ward beds were $7 per week. For your younger folks out there, you may not know what a ward is, but this picture shows you what it is. A lot of patients in one room, very little privacy. And for the first time, a baby was born in Port Huron Hospital. Port Huron Hospital resources were severely strained in 1918 because of the Spanish flu epidemic. The epidemic was the worst natural disaster of the 20th century. Between 20 and 50 million people died worldwide. And the hospital that year was enlarged by 18 beds, and additional property was purchased. In 1919, the name of the hospital was changed from Port Huron Hospital and Home to Port Huron Hospital. In 1937, the hospital expanded again. They built a brand new unit, a 105-room unit over on Willow Street. That's what this picture is. It was located where this red rectangle is. As you can see from the satellite view, Richardson and Kearney and Willow, they all used to go right straight through to Pine Grove, but now with this hospital complex, it's torn up, it's no longer through streets. The unit that you see on the right would have been the hospital that they built on Willow Street. The one on the left is called the Jinx Unit. This was originally owned by the city of Port Huron. It was called the Emergency Hospital for Treatment of Contagious Diseases. And the city gave this unit to Port Huron Hospital. It became the pediatric unit for the hospital. But in the early 1950s, with polio being so prevalent, the hospital met the challenge by converting the Jinx Pediatric Unit into a treatment unit for polio victims. And this unit used state-of-the-art respirators called iron lungs. And they recruited health providers from all across the nation to help them out. The hospital continued its expansion over the years, and as you can see here, they've gone almost to Pine Grove. But you can also see there's still some homes here. But eventually, those homes were gone too. There were some beautiful homes along Pine Grove. At one time, it probably had the finest, some of the finest homes in the city, that and also Military Street. Here's what Pine Grove looked like in 1900. When I was growing up, these are the homes that set across from Pine Grove Park. They were beautiful homes, had a lot of character to them. But eventually, they were destroyed because of the expansion of the Port Huron Hospital. While we're in this area, I'd like to share something else with you, and that's the Jefferson School, not very far from the hospital. It was a ways for me, though. I lived near Glenwood in Michigan, and I walked over to the school every day. The old school was on the corner of Poplar and Washington. The newer unit was on the corner of 10th and Washington. When I attended there were two sections, a newer section and of course this section you're looking at now, the older school. Most of the classes I attended were in the newer one, but I think I had a shop class in the basement of the school here. After the 9th grade, I no longer participated in team sports for the school because I had to work. But I did play in City League and Church League. But I said that to say this basket net here, I played a lot of basketball and practiced on that net, and a lot of it was at nighttime. No lights out there, just by moonlight. Sometimes I take a buddy with me, sometimes I take my girlfriend with me. And we shoot baskets until we got tired of shooting. Notice in this class photo from 1961 that the top of the bell tower on the school is gone. In this photo from 2009, you can see that the old school is gone, but the new section is still there. It's no longer a school. The parking lot used to be where we had our recess and played ball and so forth. That was just like all dirt. This is the view from 10th Avenue looking north at the school. Alright, going back to Pine Grove Avenue now. A little further down, you may remember this place. There was Whitliff Insurance Agency, Blondie's Hair Salon, Alberto's Bakery. A little further down, you can see it was Doc's Sporting Goods. And a little further north on the street, on the east side of the street, there was the Standard gas station. I think this was taken from 1959. I think at the time it was Reno Standard. And just beyond that, we had Powers Hamburgers. I think this was the original White Castle. And it was a drive-through, and it was a place to see and be seen in. A lot of fellows would cruise there on a weekend. And just beyond that, when I was growing up, was H.A. Grocery Store right next to the tracks. And then we come to the Thomas Street crossing. When I was growing up, right on the point of that triangle, there used to be a gas station. I remember it pretty well because they didn't have any service bays. They had a hole dug in the ground. Car would drive over it. They did the oil changes there, and the chassis worked there. So it was kind of neat to look in the hole and see if anything was happening. In the late 1800s, that triangle looked like this. Horse and buggy days. Just before you got to the Thomas Street crossing, and by the way, it was called Thomas Street Crossing because that's where the train crossed. We see a building that most of us recognize. It's Palms Crystal Bar, the home of Chicken in the Rough. When my wife and I were dating, we'd get ranch burgers there. You have to go around the back, the kitchen area, and you could pick them up to go there. And then we'd take them down to Pine Grove Park and eat them, watch the ships go by. It looks like at one time Palms Crystal Bar owned the building next to it. You can see the sign extends across both buildings. And as this picture shows, that building was destroyed by fire. And it looks like they made that area a parking lot. Before it was Palms Crystal Bar, it was mainly a drugstore. For years it was owned by Joseph Lusthofer, and he ran a drugstore out of there. And then in the early 1900s, late 1800s, it was Marquette Pharmacy, as you can see by this picture here. This vertical tube has caused a lot of curiosity in old pictures. I believe what it is a police call box, as you can see by this picture here, very similar. It was also a place where passengers could board the train there. The train made a stop at the Thomas Street crossing. And as you can see here, the passengers with their bags are getting on. In this next picture, you'll see that the folks are waiting across the street. Could be that the stop was changed so that the train wouldn't have to block the traffic, or it could be these people just want to get underneath this big shade tree here, get out of the sun. And as you can see, those tracks are long gone now. As you cross Thomas Street, though, you can see some buildings there. And at one time, this was a very popular place among the folks at this end of town because this was where the Pine Grove Theater was. In this next video clip, you'll see the Thomas Street crossing in 1942. And as you look on your left there, you can see the lights from the Pine Grove Theater. And in just a second, we'll make a loop around the block, and we'll come back heading south on Pine Grove. We'll get a better look at the theater. Here it is, right here. Pretty good view. In our next video, we'll continue north on Pine Grove and see what there is to see.